I've got Nicola again here with me today. We're talking about something important and comes up often in our practice area, which is the creation of stock plans and the issuance of stock plan equity to early stage hires. For the most part, what we are seeing due to the prevalence of online incorporations is that most startup founders will already have a stock plan, usually 10 to 15% of their authorized shares set up at incorporation by their online incorporation service. So that's anywhere from like a 1 to 1.5 million stock plan. They often don't use it right away. They might grant some restricted common stock subject to a 4-1 or 2-year vesting schedule from outside of the plan before they start using the plan. And they start to use the plan usually right about when they can maybe afford having regular 409A valuations, usually after some maybe seed financing, depending on how big the seed financing is. It is something that comes up often in our practice where they might ask us, like, what's the difference between granting restricted common stock versus an option from in a plan? And then if I'm granting options from inside the plan, what kind of options should I be granting? What's the difference between ISOs versus NSOs in terms of who we grant them to and why? And why do I have to get a 409A valuation in order to grant these options? Very common questions. And we have Nicola here today who's going to help tackle them.
This is one of the most common questions that founders ask, and I think it's worth being precise about both halves of the question. So, to tackle the first, ISO versus NSO, who can receive them? So, ISOs, or incentive stock options, can only be granted to employees, not contractors, not employee directors, not advisors. On the other hand, NSOs, or non qualified, non statutory stock options, can be granted to anyone. So, employees, contractors, advisors, board members, whoever you are. And the second part is the tax treatment when those options get exercised. And this is a big one. So with NSOs, the spread between the exercise price and the fair market value at exercise is taxed as ordinary income at the time of exercise, subject to withholding. And then the company gets a corresponding tax deduction. But with ISOs, there's no regular income tax at exercise at all. The spread is only a potential AMT, or alternative minimum tax preference item. If the holder meets the holding period requirements, so that's 2 years from grant, 1 year from exercise before selling, then the entire grant on sale is taxed at long-term capital gains rather than ordinary income. And the company gets no tax deduction if the ISO holding periods are met. So in practice, ISOs are generally better for employees from a tax perspective, assuming they hold long enough, don't get hit hard by AMT, which is why they're the default for employee grants at most startups. NSOs are what you're kind of stuck with for contractors and advisors, and are also used for the portion of an employee's options that exceed the $100,000 ISO cap. And then to address the second half of the question, why the 409A valuation has to come first, Section 409A of the Internal Revenue Code governs deferred compensation, and stock options are treated as a form of deferred compensation unless they're exempted, which requires the exercise price to be set at or above the fair market value of the common stock on the grant date. So if a company grants an option with a strike price below the fair market value, even unintentionally, as can happen from time to time, the options become subject to 409A's penalty regime. So the immediate income tax is on vesting, not on exercise. And there's an additional 20% federal penalty tax plus interest, which falls on the option holder, not on the company. And a qualified independent 409A valuation is what gives the company a rebuttable presumption of reasonableness under the IRS safe harbor. So without that, the burden falls on the company to prove after the fact that its strike price was fair market value, which is a much harder and riskier position if the IRS or an acquirer's diligence team ever challenges it. So that's why a 409A valuation needs to be refreshed regularly. Default rules every 12 months or sooner if a material event like a price financing round, since a new preferred round resets what fair market value of the common stock actually is. So the two questions actually do connect to directly. Whether you're granting ISOs or NSOs, you need a defensible strike price to avoid any foreign penalties. And getting that valuation is what lets the board set that price with confidence instead of guessing.
And there's tons of 409A providers out there. A lot of you might use online incorporation services with online cap table management software. You might be able to get a $3,000-ish 409A valuation there. Alternatively, some of you may choose a